Welcome to the Conquer Your Battlefield podcast, where we come together to discuss some of the more significant struggles and metaphorical battlefields that we've faced along our journeys and share some insight on how we've conquered them. I'm JD McGibney, and today I'll be chatting with one of my favorite guitar players on the planet, the masterful, the witty, the extremely metal, and totally humble Eli Santana of Ignite, Incite, Holy Grail, and Huntress. How you doing, Eli?
Good, JD, man. Good to see you and hear you.
And here you go. I know it's definitely been way too long. Where's the time go, dude?
Yeah, but you're back in LA now, right?
I am. We're like, time zone neighbors now. Again.
Yeah, that's I'll take what I can get.
Once the holiday's over, we're definitely gonna have to figure out a way to actually meet up in person again.
Yeah, no, it's funny, like you say that. As much as I love seeing family and having time off, as someone who's always like cursed with needing to be productive, having like a half month, where you can't like do stuff is just driving me nuts.
Imagine the feeling of cabin fever setting in. And I think that is a perfect segue to kind of lead into what we're going to be talking about. So today, we're going to be talking about self-image, the definition of which is pretty simple and straightforward. Self-image is the view an individual has of themselves. When analyzing self-image, there are generally four categories: how you see yourself, how others see you, how you perceive others see you, and how you perceive you see yourself. Often, we hear of friends and loved ones struggling with their self-image, or even find ourselves struggling. Having a negative self-image can come from a variety of factors, from early childhood development, one's natural personality to constantly be setting higher and higher standards outside of a reasonable reach, or even the actual or perceived standards of the society that we lived in. Learning to be comfortable with oneself is sometimes a difficult process, and no two individuals' journeys are alike. Understanding one's own personality, desires, and motivations are key, as well as their desired role in the world that they live in. Eli, we've talked a little bit in private outside of this podcast about how you've struggled with your own self-image. When did you first realize that this struggle was part of your life, and do you feel that you have found a way to conquer those thoughts?
I think just with self-image, I think I like had to face it a little bit earlier. Well, I don't know, everybody's journey is different, but like so I went to a Christian school, like a private school, when I was like in elementary school. Mm-hmm. And I was like pretty much the only like Mexican, brown kid in the school. So it was a thing where like, kids are just kind of saying what they see, and I'm different. And so like, it was a thing where like, I was kind of hit with that pretty early. And so it was, kids just want to fit in. So it was a thing I struggled with as a child, and not wanting to look the way that I did, and wanting to just kind of keep a low profile and just like fit in. And it was a thing where I kind of developed a quicker tongue, because it was like, when you're chucking insults back on the playground and stuff, you can't like, you can't point out the thing that everybody is. So you got to get super creative and personal. And that was like a kind of a weird, upbringing, and dealing with like, just straight up racism at a pretty early age. And that, that whole thing, like, it's, I mean, and honestly, until recently, until I started doing like work on it, I realized how much it like kind of gave me like a chip on my shoulder. And I realized I was holding on to a lot of that resentment, basically towards the world. And so it's been a very, very like gradual process of like liking that part of me, having my ethnicity, and like getting to the point where it's like, no, this is cool. I want to know where I come from. I want to know my ancestry. I want to know like just the cool like cultural things that like I kind of basically shunned my whole life, because I was ashamed you know? And so like dealing with what we're talking about, it was something that I really had to take serious and face, and almost in like a educational way, like, you know, actually read books on what we're talking about right now. So this is kind of perfect. We're talking about it. So, and then just, it's weird because, like, you know, what you were saying in the just kind of description of self-image. I kind of found myself dealing like having trouble looking at pictures of myself or like looking in the mirror, because I always liked the way I was described by people and like through other people's eyes. And it was like a thing, like no one's gonna be like, yo, what's up, you're ugly, you know? So it was like in my head there was like a version of myself when people like, oh, you know, like you're handsome or something like that. It's like this, like, you know, almost Disney version of yourself. And then you go see a picture and you're like, oh, that was not what I thought in my head.
So you're basically you're saying that because of like you saying that you develop this sense of like a cognitive dissonance where like you would hear these compliments, and because of what you dealt with as a child, like a really really early age, you know, during like your very like, you know, formative years, you kind of like you hear these things and you have like, you know, your imagination, you know, builds whatever image, you know, in your head, and then you physically see, you know, like a representation, like an actual photograph, or like you said, like you walk by like a mirror and it wasn't aligning with what you were building in your head. What that's a very significant, you know, like disconnect that you're talking about. When is it that you realized that there was that cognitive dissonance going on, and when did you start like taking note of like, oh, maybe like there's something going on?
That was probably when I was an adult, because I was, you know, kind of able to come to terms with like my ethnicity, and realize, and you know, my early 20s, it was just like I was more accepting, not like celebrating being like dark skin and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, dude, I think it might have even been my like late 20s, you know, when I started, like things started kind of coming together musically, and like being on stage, and just, you know, you being on stage and was just like, I could be anything I wanted almost. And then getting a good reaction from people, it was like, oh, okay. I don't know, whatever. Like I've been told that I look cool on stage or whatever, and then going and seeing pictures and then them starting to line up with what I saw in my head to what I would see in a picture. Like I knew what I was going to look like. And that was, you know, yeah, I mean, like early 30s, like late 20s, man. That's
a, you know, a pretty long time, you know, just if we take the time to think about it, you know, from like elementary school, I think is when you mentioned like you were in the Christian school, and then going up until like your late 20s, early 30s. That's minimum of like 2 decades of like having you know, this conflict of like your own self-image. And it sounds like there's a lot of like cognitive dissonance where like things weren't aligning. And if I'm understanding what you're saying, a lot of what you established for your own self-image was reliant on what other people thought of, or what you thought other people perceived of you. And is that correct? Where like that's where a lot of your weight was being put?
Right. Yeah. And it was just like a thing like of compliments about my appearance. It always felt better than what I actually saw in pictures and like mirrors, you know, reflections and stuff like that. And so like, or like the actual, what it actually is. And so it was just the thing where like, I realized like, oh, I'm always going to myself look better in those compliments, basically, like through the eyes of other people, you know? And so that's a weird thing to like, and it was something that I kind of like didn't realize was even happening until recently, just like was just really taking accountability for my thoughts and like, self-talk and, stuff like that.
Yeah, self-talk is extremely, extremely important. And it's weird because like it's something you don't necessarily think of because, half the time if you're talking to yourself, you're just thinking in your head, it's just like snap of the finger. It's happening like really quickly. And like, a lot of times it takes a lot of mindfulness to be aware of what you're saying to yourself, and I personally think that that's a very important skill because like you just said, like it took you until like your 30s before you started really taking note of it and making sure that you're like, all right, maybe I should like adjust what I'm saying to myself. And like, imagine what would have been different had you started taking note of this when you were like in elementary school or junior high or high school.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's, I think a lot of people, go through like the high school years of just being unsure and embarrassed and, freaking out about like, wait, should I wear this shirt? And should I, and at the end of the day, no one cares, and
we think everyone cares, but at the end of the day, like, no one really cares, especially if it's an Iron Maiden shirt. Everyone loves Iron Maiden. So.
Yeah, no, totally. And, but it was, I mean, yeah, not to get to like, deep on this, but like, dude, I would like shy away from like eating like Mexican food, like in front of people, like when I was younger, because it was like, oh, like the Mexicans eating Mexican food. And it was like,
that's actually really like fascinating that you're saying that because like the perception that people were going to judge you not only on your appearance but like the food that you were eating, was that a conscious decision that you did, or is that just something you did like unconsciously and you're like, oh wait, I'm not doing this?
I think it was like unconscious and like going back to I'd already got kind of picked on for it, and so I was just like, oh, I need to like anything that's even aligned with my ethnicity, I want to, be as far away from that I can. But growing up in San Diego, like it's almost like Mexican food and burritos is like just Southern California. It's not even
Yeah, it's like Mexican food and burrito places are like pizza places in New York City. They're like every other shop. It's like Starbucks burrito.
Yeah, and most of them are like really, really good. And so what I think once I got away from that was just like, this is stupid. I'm not eating really good food because I'm afraid to get made fun of, but I realized that's how, what I guess trauma, whatever that led to, and being that self-conscious. And I was always, speaking of self-image, like I was always just really like self-conscious about my height. And it's like, I'm not like super, I mean, there's people my height playing in the NFL, which was my excuse for years. I'm like, oh, I just wasn't, I could have played in the NFL. And it's like, no, but like, that was like kind of adding to, that my skin color, it was just like, it was like a physical, from far away, I felt different.
It was stuff that was outside of your control that. Yeah. So you had mentioned you started questioning and changing your opinion of yourself and your view of yourself once you started to see progress happening with like music, when you said you started to see things happening more in like your music career. How is it, do you feel that helped you change your perception?
I think it was because it was a conscious decision to not kind of be at the mercy of like, oh, I'm just going to kind of not wanting to go under the radar. It was like wanting to, peacock, if you will. But it was just like, no, I'm going to wear like, my battle vest on this stage, and I'm going to have, I'm not going to cut my hair, and I'm going to wear cut off sleeves and stuff like that. And then just like, no, I'm making a conscious effort to be full metal all the time, you know? And it was a thing where like, I was never, you know, in a button up shirt going to like, you know, my office job, wishing I could wear the Iron Maiden shirt. And it was like, no, I'm
You're gonna wear
taking
the Iron
control
Maiden
of that.
shirt.
Yeah, no, because that's who I am. That's how I feel inside. And that was like a thing where it was from how I walked around in life. You know, I changed my pants because I didn't want my everyday pants to smell, but it wasn't, I was pretty much who I was on stage. I mean, obviously like a, you know, superhero version, but I was pretty much myself in life. And that was like the first time, like I really felt comfortable.
It sounds like you gave yourself permission to just be you on stage.
Yes. Yeah. And then that was like a thing where like, no matter where I went, you know, I was like, no, it was almost like, it was cool because it was like, I got to choose my identity. I got to choose my race, my ethnicity, and it was metal. And I could just go be that no matter where I went, you know, and just not be ashamed of it. And so that was like, and a lot of people figure that out in high school, and I fumbled with it, but
you know, you know, diverging slightly, you know, it's one thing that I personally have loved about, you know, the genre of metal is like, it's culturally and like the society within metal, it's very accepting no matter who you are, where you're from. You know, like people like rag on each other, like jokingly about like which sub genre you like. But when it comes down to it, it's all like, you know, it's all metal and it's all the sense of brotherhood, sisterhood, where like, you know, we all acknowledge that like we have these intense emotions, whether they're positive or negative. And it's like part of the culture is to feel free to express everything and just be there for one another. Even if you're, say, in a mosh pit, you know, it's an intense place. It's a chaotic place. But, you know, rule number one is someone falls, you pick them up.
Exactly.
And it's really like a beautiful thing, you know, just hearing your sense of understanding who you were, like being up on stage and giving yourself that permission to be like, you know what, I'm going to do this thing because this is what I want to do. And then like feeling the positive reaction, not only from like outside people, but feeling like the internal happiness and like this feeling of centered that it sounds like you were getting from just doing with the thing that you wanted to do and like giving yourself permission to do that and kind of just not really caring what like other people are going to think. Like, you know, you said wearing the Iron Maiden shirt, wearing your battle vest, having your hair long, you know, kind of just like being free and being like the superhero version of yourself.
Yeah, dude, I mean, you're spot on. And well, and it's just it's kind of cool because it's like, as you know, like you'll be out somewhere and you see another long hair with like a metal band shirt, and it's almost like when dogs see each other, they're like, yeah. I mean, that's how we met. We were like on set, and I was like,
it's like it's like long hair, metal.
Now we're buds. Now we hang out.
It's so cool how like that works too. It's just, I very much love the metal community for that. It's like you could literally, like you just said, like lock eyes with someone like across the street in a city, like especially in like, you know, LA, or I imagine like San Diego too. It's like you don't really see a lot of metalheads everywhere. Like maybe in Hollywood you'll be like, oh, metalhead, but like say you're in like, you know, Santa Monica and you lock eyes with another metalhead. It's just like, you know, everything is in slow-mo. There's like flowers bloom out of nowhere. It's just like really happy music. The Partridge Family or whatever.
yeah. And it, you know, it's just like it's to do with like a Cannibal Corpse shirt, and you're like, oh, hey man.
How's your day going?
Yeah. It's, and that it was good for me, you know, to like really embrace. And as far as like we were talking about, where like getting compliments about like your appearance, it was, I think that was when like that kind of started happening more often. And honestly, I think it was just because, you know, when you feel comfortable with yourself, I think that just like it's people can sense that,
Oh yeah,
that you're just more
100%.
comfortable in your skin,
And there's so much that like we portray in our communication with other people just from like our body language and like our choice of words, what we say, how we say it, that like we're not paying attention to. It's just that like we do these things and people subconsciously pick up on it. And people want to either be like, oh, I want to know more, I want to be around this person, or like the person's weirding me out because of these little things. And you're 100% like spot on. I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you feel that because when you were younger you had, and like you had this kind of like conflicted like self-image, that you gravitated towards heavy metal? Or do you feel that like heavy metal was like introduced to you like through some some other situation, and it was just like, oh, this just happens to like line up?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I just like gravitated towards it because I just like it spoke to me. I mean, obviously it was in the beginning, it was like more glam.
Of course.
But that was like a weird thing. It was young enough to think that like, oh, I could look like Bret Michaels or like Janie Lane from Warrant. And then, not until like I was getting older, I was like, wait, none of them are like Mexican or like, native or anything. And I was like, wait, like, do I not get to, front a glam band because of my ethnicity? And it was almost like a kind of like a sad, like really obviously, you can do whatever you want to do. You're going to have to like work through stuff. Like thankfully not as much anymore, but like back then, had I been grown up how I wanted to be, maybe it would have been more difficult, to have my own glam band. But I think I did find like in middle school, seeing the dude with the Sepultura shirt, that like, oh, at least I have that dude. He doesn't care what I look like.
Yeah.
Because I also like metal. So it was, that was that brotherhood was something that I had pretty early on, thankfully. And that meant a lot,
I think it's interesting that you're pointing out the whole, wanting to front like a glam band. Like most of the bands that you've been in, like you've played guitar, and like you're a phenomenal guitar player, like hands down, like amazing. And
means a lot coming from you, man.
Oh, thank you. You're making me blush underneath this hair on my face.
Yeah.
But it's taken you until recently to front a band and like actually like sing. Like we met and you were just starting to put out like Alien Satan, which was like your solo project, and now you're solely singing in Ignite. So do you feel that because of how you perceived yourself from like childhood until somewhat recently, that has been a reason why you've shied away from being the front man of a band?
Yeah, maybe like so, yeah, like a little bit like subconsciously, like that. It was almost like I kind of got like I had something I always wanted to do, and something that like I had been working at, and it was something that I thought I could do, but it was as far as like actually taking that leap, it did take a lot, and it took like circumstances to even make it happen. It wasn't like I was banging down doors to be like, hey, I'm a lead singer. I was singing in my own band. Also, thank you for playing with me, man.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
But it was like a thing that like I knew that I wanted to do that in that capacity. But as far as like planning to sing for like a hardcore band, I wouldn't have been able to call that shot in a million years. It was just Craig, the drummer of Ignite, liked Holy Grail, and we became friends. And I've been a fan of Ignite since like 2000. And so I was like, you know, kind of a little starstruck, you know, like I remember like texting somebody at like NAMM, I'm like, dude, I'm partying with the drummer from Ignite. And that was like, you know, I was stoked on just that. And then so he kind of hit me up about like finding like a singer, and if I knew anybody from like the metal side of it. And I had kind of been drinking a little bit, and I was just like, yo, like I'll do it. And then I get like, you know, an email with like these files to sing on. I'm like, wait, what did I do last night? Well, but it was like, and all of it was like, this is so cool. Like, this is so much fun. Not like actually thinking I was going to like get the gig. And then,
you're just like, you know, bullshitting with your buddy, and you're like, hey, I'll do it. And then you're like, oh, wait,
totally.
This is for realsies?
Right. And I was, you know, which I'm still trying to finish, but things will get done when they need to get done, you know, as you know, as far as like trying to put your own stuff out and not putting deadlines on yourself. I was trying to finish my record, and then it was like, no, I'm going to take time away from that, and I'm going to work on this audition.
Yeah. And then you were also doing Incite, not Ignite.
Yes.
Incite. So you had that gig too.
My stepdad 7-string has yet to get it right. Yeah. No, dude.
Welcome to the dark side, my friend.
Buddy. I fought it kicking and screaming. But it was a thing where I'm like, oh man, this is like, there's opportunity here with this whole other string I didn't even know about.
I totally did the same thing. I fought it like tooth and nail. I'm like, I just tuned down to drop C if I wanted to like tune down, blah, blah, blah. And then I was in a band on Long Island before I even, you know, moved out to LA the first time. And the other guitar player in the band that I was with just got a 7-string. Well, I'm like, shit, I have to like get one to keep up with whatever you write now. And then within 20 minutes of me like playing one, I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm never going back.
Yeah, because I like that, you know, when I've seen you play, it's like, I don't think that calls for a 7-string, but he plays a 7-string.
Well,
you know?
Like when we do like the jam nights, like sometimes like the songs are in like different tunings, and I'm like, I never have to change my tuning. Like, what's the low note? All right, cool, I'm here, done.
Cool, I'll just slide my hand over. Yeah. Next song.
It's just like, all right, well, I never have to change. Like the only time I ever change tuning is like, all right, I'll play and drop A for shits and giggles, but that's it.
Yeah, totally. Which is, I had like a side project that I was trying to play in like a drop A, and it was, and that was the crazy thing about like playing with Incite and playing with the other band that hopefully sees the light of day. Was that all my tricks? Well, not all of them, but a lot of them were fucking gone, and I had to like actually be a musician.
That's funny.
Yeah, like when we played in Incite, played this festival, I broke string. Because it was in Mexico City, so I brought one guitar, and I'm like, it's fine. I broke a string, and then it was like, hey, do a guitar solo in front of like thousands of people on the 7-string you're not comfortable on, also missing one of the higher strings, and I was like, crap.
That right there is a test of your self-image and your confidence to be like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to make this happen.
Yeah. And so I just went like extra bluesy, and like it ended up
pentatonic to the rescue.
Oh, dude. Yeah. And it ended up like kind of being really like a really cool guitar solo where I would have just tried to throw all my tricks at the crowd. And it was just like the whole thing, like just being present and being like, I don't know, I'll let the muse take over on this one or whatever.
Well, good job.
Yes.
And it's fantastic too to see that, like, you know, you were saying like as a child and like growing up, you shied away from a lot of stuff. You were very reserved. Like you seemed like, I believe you're saying you were really quiet and like kind of like were very conscious about your actions. Yeah, like here you are like in your 30s now, and like you're like, oh, let me just play in front of thousands of people. It's like, oh, shit just went wrong, and like I have to like improvise on the fly, and you're like, I got this. So it's interesting to see that journey that, like, you know, baby Eli went to, like, you know, adult superhero Eli.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And that's, I mean, that kind of Well, I mean, that's interesting to think about. Of It's all comes down to just being comfortable, and then if you put the hours in, and it was like, yeah, I put the hours in not only as a guitar player, but just as thinking as a musician, yeah, as a human. And so when you go into kind of go back to what we're talking about self-image, it's almost like, as far as like doing work on yourself, and being comfortable with yourself, and like you were saying, like being mindful of your self-talk, and realizing that these horrible thoughts are just thoughts. The more practice you put in with that, you're going to be more comfortable in any situation where you're,
and the fact that you are able to control your thoughts, because like you are the one creating them. So like the idea of being mindful of your self-talk and getting into a habit of being positive and like affirming, your abilities and what you can do, as opposed to focusing on what you think people think, or like saying, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, and like setting boundaries for yourself, like unrealistic, unhealthy boundaries, because boundaries are definitely important, but like just kind of like putting yourself in a box. Yeah. Do you feel that music in general has been important in helping you kind of like blossom and kind of like get out of that box that you felt you were being put into as a child?
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely, because it was I don't know, it kind of always felt like a superpower, because you put in all this time to get good at something, and it was like no matter no matter what people perceive of you, it's like you go and do what you're good at, and like it doesn't matter what you like. You're like, okay, I mean, I guess pretty good, and so it was a thing where I felt like it opened doors just to be, for me to like just be seen as me, other than just kind of had I never picked up an instrument or played music. And obviously that can't be true, but that's how it felt. It felt like I mean, at the very least, it was an icebreaker to like have people get to know the real me, and talk with me, and not whatever like kind of preconceived notions they had when they saw me could be thrown away, and be like, oh, this is this dude, I hopefully want to hang out with him.
You felt you felt like the skill of playing guitar, playing music in general, was combating what people might have like the stereotype of the ethnicity, is what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah.
How do you feel that playing guitar is different than singing in that regard?
So it's a trip, man, because I'm kind of like at the beginning of that, because it is like, I mean, I was just like, I always felt I was a singer, and I always sang backups in bands, and as you playing with me, like played and sang. So it was I never doubted that, but now it's like where I'm only doing that,
only singing.
Yeah. It is another, like, it's almost like kind of starting over with working that out in my head.
Interesting.
And so
because you Ignite has played a couple of festivals recently, right? Or somewhat recently.
Yeah. I mean, the first show that I fronted the band was at this like punk rock festival, for like all these people, and it was, you just kind of look out and you're like, well,
it's a lot of people.
Let's throw me in the deep end. Let's see if I can swim, But it was, and then too, like with that, like kind of what we're talking about with like the metal image, it's like now like Ignite being more hardcore punk. It's kind of like, wait, is this
too metal?
Yeah, no, totally. And then it's funny. Here I am thinking like, wait, should I wear this on stage? Will it be perceived with this? And the Ignite dudes have been rad. They're like, dude, do you, we're not looking for someone to wear like a punk rock costume. Like, we hired you, man. Like, and then that's been really cool. And like, you know, it was like a thing like, oh, should I, you know, put my hair under a cap or, you know, do something about like, you know, this stallion hair that and it was like, nah, man, let that shit fly. And so, and that's been really, really cool because I mean, they're going through a transformation as well. And so we're all kind of doing this together, and it is nice.
And it sounds like the entire, like everyone in the band has been like extremely encouraging and supportive of you just being you, which, you know, kudos, because that's, you know, that's how it should always be, especially not even just for like a business setting or like a band setting, but like for friends and like in any situation where you're with people, you should always be around people that are always going to encourage you to be, you know, you.
Dude, that's like it's like awesome to say that, and it's almost like you kind of need to say it more because it's like you need to take stock of like, okay, well, who am I hanging out there? What is it? The 5 people that you hang out with the most?
Is it the 5 people that you see the most become the world you live in?
Right. And so if you have somebody who's like giving you shit about like, man, I kind of just want to wear these boots or something, and then be like, yo, what's up with them boots? And you're like, oh, you know, and you feel small. And really, it's just like,
you're out. Boots are important.
No, totally.
Yeah. But it's, you know, talking about self-image, that's something that, you know, you're 100% right. It's something that has to be said because, you know, a lot of times, especially, you know, kids who just don't have a filter and just kind of just say whatever is like on their mind, or like going into like adolescence where everyone's trying to like find out who they are as individuals and kind of like developing like an actual like personality. You know, you have to remind and teach one another that like you can be who you want to be, and whatever makes you comfortable, you know, do it, but also be around people who are going to encourage it, as long as you're not hurting yourself or anyone else, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy, man. I just saw this quote. I mean, maybe it's just a good quote and it's not, there's no validity to it, but it was like how we talk to our kids becomes their like inner voice, you know? And so and I think that goes too with like, you know, the people that you hang out with the most, also kind of becomes like that voice in your head, you know, along with parents. And
very much agree with that. Especially like, you know, when you're hearing all this stuff, like as a child, and you're like just a vacuum for knowledge.
Right. And it's like these, you know, these things that aren't true, like you hang on to, and it's like, oh, you know, like I was saying, we're like, oh, I can't eat that burrito in front of these people. I'm like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
You know?
You missed out on so many burritos, Eli.
God, you said it, man.
Living in Southern California, it's just like, you know, so many burritos like passed you by.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll have a burrito today just to, you know, let's put the nail in that coffin.
Oh man, I'll drive down to San Diego. We'll have burrito lunch, dinner.
Yes, yes, dude. I got the cool thing in San Diego. Even like, you know, you throw a rock and hit a taco shop, and like I'm pretty sure it's gonna be good. So.
Oh yeah, no. Like moving back to LA, I am very, very happy to have like genuine like Mexican food like at my disposal, because like anywhere like else that I've been, pretty much Mexican food has been quote unquote Taco Bell, and it's like no, dude, it's terrible.
Yeah, I mean on paper it's Mexican food, yeah. So there was kind of something like just with kind of, we're talking about self-image that like I thought of. And, you know, you seem like a fit dude. Like, have you, as far as like maybe researching this and everything, like as far as like working out and like body image and that, sorry if I'm like kind of taking the reins on the conversation, but it pops in my head with like the whole metal thing. But like, because there's been times where I've been in like, you know, pretty decent shape, and it's like, it's hot on stage. You're like, oh, screw it, I'm going to take my shirt off. And it's a trip because like, then you kind of in your head sometimes get attached to like, oh, there's that version of me that was in really good shape that was shirtless. And then anytime that I'm not like that because, bodies fluctuate, man. It's like,
Yeah.
even
From,
models
like,
aren't going to look like that.
Yeah. Just like, even like from beginning of the day to like middle of the day, like if you wake up and you haven't eaten, you're going to be, one way. And then if you gorge yourself on like a Thanksgiving meal, you can have a bit of a belly no matter who you are and whatever shape you're in. Cause
Sure.
everyone eats like 18 gallons of turkey and like just drinks, like a jug of gravy because that's what you do on Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Body image has been something that like I personally have struggled with. I'm short. I'm 5'4", and like I got picked on as a kid for being the short kid all the time. And it took me until like my mid-20s or so, early 20s, mid-20s, before I was like okay with my height. Because like, I ended up dating a girl who was like 4 inches taller than me and like wore heels all the time. And she didn't care. I didn't care. I was like, all right, well, if she don't care and like we're in this relationship for like a year and a half, like
good for you.
Right,
I mean, not
my
just
height
for
doesn't
dating,
really matter.
not just for dating. I'm not saying good for you for dating the tall girl, but for you just saying,
if she doesn't care, why should I care?
And then like sticking to that and believing that is like rad, man. It's huge. And it's something because I'm 5'8", and it's like I still like struggle with that. Like every now and then I'm just like, fuck, like if it's like, and neither of us are like really that short. And so to be,
I mean, I'm pretty short. I think I've had to duck for things maybe twice in my entire life. I'm just walk under everything.
Yeah.
What do you mean people have to duck? Like, what is this ducking thing?
Yeah. What is a phrase you'll never hear is watch your head, Mr. DeVito.
Oh God, that's funny. But yeah, going back to what you originally said about like exercising, like both of my parents have been out of shape, and like I've seen like from like an early age what the consequences like physically of like what happens, like having issues with like potentially getting diabetes or like having issues with like knees and like cartilage. Like my grandfather was also overweight, so like I just saw this stuff. So like I made a conscious effort at the age of like 17, 18 to be like, I'm going to exercise every single day in some way, shape, or form. So I've been exercising in some capacity since then, and like I just also have just had a really low self-esteem, very poor self-image for most of my life. And so my body type naturally, as a kid was just like rail thin. So like I started exercising too, to just be like, let me just be like tone and shape. Like I never tried to get like big and like jacked. I never tried to be like a weightlifter, but I was like, let me at least have some muscle definition. This way, like I could feel good about myself. And it took, I would say it's like more recently where like I still struggle with that image sometimes, where it's just like, sometimes like I'll eat something like, oh man, I'm getting fat. Like I had a belly for the first time in my entire life over the pandemic, and like it freaked me the fuck out. I was like, I can't do this. And like I went and like re-upped my exercise routine and whatnot. But like for the most part, I exercise now just to maintain staying healthy. Like I do have those moments in those days where I'm like, oh, like I'm overcritical of how I look. Yeah. But then I'm I take the time to be like, oh, this is not a logical thing. I am me. This is my body. I'm doing these things. So logically, I have to be in shape. I'm just like not in a good mental space. And like I take note of that, and like I just stick to, I stick to my routine. And like at this point, like it's kept me in pretty decent shape. Like I've seen people that I've grown up with, and I've seen them physically change, and I'm like, I'm definitely not like that. So I'm going to continue doing the thing that I'm doing to stay, healthy, which is my main concern.
Yeah. And that has to be, I think that's the only way that I've noticed that that's sustainable. And I'm really trying to, as far as like working out and exercising and stuff like that, like go more how I feel and not like how I look, because, the times that I've like worked out super hard and like, I've done, a couple of different diets that weren't sustainable and probably not healthy, to just get like shredded and stuff like that. And it was like, okay, what was my why? My why was I wanted to look good because I was insecure. And so like, and even like you were saying in the pandemic, because where I kind of, I mean, I tried to do home workouts, but it was just
completely
rough.
different.
It's so different. And struggling with like, oh, like I'm not like how I looked in that one picture and that's how I'm supposed to look, and like, and thinking like, oh, how embarrassing would it be to like be seen with a gut when there's that picture of me with a six pack. And it's just like, again, like who cares? Like people,
or even the fact, is there a gut? Am I just overly critical of what I'm defining as a gut too? That's something else to keep in mind.
Yeah, because I've had times where I was just like, oh, I didn't want to take my shirt off because I felt like I had a gut, and then you go and look at pictures, you're just like, okay, well, I want to be him right now, and but even just thinking of like, well, who cares, like, why do you have to look a certain way just because you looked a certain way before, or that's how you want to look? That's how you imagined yourself in pictures or whatever.
Yeah, well, that's also interesting too, is like the idea of like body dysmorphia, as being part of like your self-image. Like you just said, looking at a picture in the past, like I also have had instances where like in the moment, like I felt like I wasn't in shape, like I felt like I wasn't doing what I wanted to do, like I felt like I just was like that fucking noodle arm spaghetti boy.
Yeah.
And then like I had a picture, I took a picture. And then like going back like 2, 3, 4 years and seeing that picture now, I'm like, oh wow, I was like really in shape. What the hell was I thinking? It's like, how did I get that? And it's like, I think also being in the moment, it's really hard to see all the progress that's being made as you lead up to like where you are. And unless you like look back and you're like, oh yeah, or if you like progress and something changes, and then you look back at that moment that you were like just being overly critical, and that goes with I think most things for like humans, not just like our self-image or like what we physically look like, but like our progress in our career. It's like you're doing things day by day. You're working on one project. You're always just looking at that moment, that instance. It takes, you don't really see the full scope of everything until you step back and look back, or like look forward to be like, oh, I don't have to go much further to get to, my goal, or like it came like a really far way from where I started.
Yeah, no. And that's, I think with, like the self-help community and goals and, no days off and stuff like that. It's, and I think there are like pockets that are trying to value kind of what you're saying, where it's like, no, you need to stop and like, celebrate what you've accomplished and celebrate where you came from, and like really try to think like, I mean, shit, if you just go like as far as like working out and not just like, oh, I'm not able to wear this, or I don't look like this. But like, if you go to like, could you do that workout when you started this whole regime, but now you're like doing, let's say 50 burpees or something like that.
And you started off being able to do 5.
Exactly.
That's progress.
Right. And so that's something, and two, where I've been trying to really focus more on, not just the looks of it, but like, where you go to like put your shoe on or something, and like mid pandemic, you're like, wait, was this always hard like that? And then, and then you start working on again.
That vest, you're like, oh, I don't remember this ever being tight. What's going on?
Yeah, hey, all my clothes are shrinking. We got to get a new washer. But it was just, it's kind of the thing, like how you feel needs to be more the thing, and like how you feel doing a workout. And I'm trying to focus on that. And I'm still struggling with it, with the whole self-image. Like I don't have like a complete handle on it.
Yeah, it takes a lot to, especially like if you've gone like your entire life, not doing like not taking the steps to like, make sure you have those tools to like keep yourself grounded and like, at baseline. It takes a lot of work to like undo any kind of like trauma, or like, unlearn like bad habits, especially if you're doing it like on your own, like you're not like seeing like a therapist. Even if you do see a therapist, it's still a lot of work to like get to where you want to be.
No, and it's, I mean, kind of like what I was saying. I mean, it does like it kind of takes practice and repetition to get in, because even like seeing a therapist, it'll make sense in the moment. And you're like, okay, I got it. I'll just do this when this happens. But it's like the Mike Tyson thing, like, everybody has a plan until they get hit.
Yep.
And so when you're in the moment, sometimes it just kind of all goes to hell. And you're like, wait, well, remember your training. You're like, wait, what was my training?
Yeah, because that's the like unlearning that bad behavior. Because like if you've been doing something for like, 5, 10, 20, 30 years, your mind is like instinctually just going to be doing stuff. So like your behavior is just going to be like, it's like automatically taking your hand off a hot stove. You have to like stop and be like, oh wait, maybe is this really hot? I have to pause and then like adjust from there.
Yeah, no, totally. It's like no one should tie elephants to posts, but it's the whole thing where like they, you would tie like a baby elephant to like a stake, and then they couldn't get away. And it was a thing where like they would grow up to a full elephant and they're, super strong because, of being elephants, but they're still like, no, I can't get away because of the little.
Because they've trained that like, oh, I can't get away from the pole.
Right. And so we need to be better elephants and remember that we're elephants.
We have to realize that over time we develop skills and the ability to unchain ourselves.
Yeah,
I like
realize
that.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, let's we'll fix it in post, don't worry.
We're all Dumbo secretly. That's really what it is. We all have amazing ears. We can actually
fly, and we have a rad hat.
That's right, he did have the rad hat. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah,
the little like yellow thing.
But yeah, and speaking, it's you shouldn't really drink moonshine. I realized that was a weird thing in a Disney movie with people getting wasted.
There's a lot of weird stuff that's hidden in Disney movies that like you don't realize until like, you go back and you're like, oh my god. I don't need to open that can of worms, but I watched a clip with total side tangent of like the movie Cars, and someone pointed out that like at the very beginning where like Lightning McQueen's like talking to like the two like female like fangirls and then whatever, and like he's talking whatever blah blah blah, and then like their headlights flash and he just goes, oh man, I love being me or something like that. They flashed him in a Disney movie.
And dude, that's not like not like 70s 80s Disney. That
is like 15 years ago. Maybe. Like we were adults when that movie came out.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah. Disney's getting away with some weird stuff.
Oh yeah.
But on that note, thank you so much for taking the time to chat, Eli. And thank you for just being so open and honest about like what you went through and like what you were feeling as a child and like how you've gotten to where you are today.
Dude, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for doing this, and it's just really an important work to like put that out into the world, and I think just talking about this stuff, it does help people. Like I know that like the times I've heard conversations like this, but you can't hear it enough, I guess, is what I'm saying, because we're not alone. We all go through things. And so like, thank you for doing this. It's rad, man.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. Like you just pointed out, it's like just hearing other people have these kind of conversations. It's like, oh wait, I can relate to that. Like I truly believe that more that we as a society feel comfortable opening up in general, I feel that it's the more we can help one another. And I believe that everyone has the inner strength to face whatever life puts along their path. So thank you again for taking the time to chat. And then thank you to anyone that has tuned in to this episode. If anyone watching this finds that they are struggling with their mental health, Please do not be afraid to reach out to your friends, your family, or a mental health professional. I will have a link in the description of this video that will have some information and connections to further resources. And until next time, remember, you always have the strength to conquer your battlefield.